And we're live.
All right. Hello. This is the BCH Blaze Workshop number 1 BCH Stack Overview. If you don't know me, I'm Jeremy. I'm the host of the Bitcoin Cash podcast and also one of the co-organizers of BCH Blaze, which is a hackathon for Bitcoin Cash. We did a stream last week where we broke down all about what is Blaze and how it works and everything like that. So if you need to do some catching up on the background, that is where I would direct you. Also, if you want to sign up, you can check out Dora Hacks, which is linked in the description. That's the platform where people can join up and submit their projects, join teams, and all of that kind of stuff. But today we're doing the first in a series of 3 workshops with BCH experts, so that people who are just new to BCH maybe, or even if you've been involved in BCH a little bit, but you have some questions, can find out how to build in BCH and how to make projects so you can prepare up, train up for when the actual hackathon competition starts on November 15th. But you've got a couple of weeks before then to get some expert advice and practice up so you're ready for the hackathon itself. So we're not going to go over everything that we did last week, but we do have a new video which summarizes some of the key points. So we're just going to quickly play that. What is BCH Blaze? After several years of hard work on protocol upgrades, Bitcoin Cash is now an industry-leading cryptocurrency, offering UTXO Layer 1 smart contracts and technology at unmatched power and efficiency on a foundation of sound money. The BCH community is growing fast, and excitement is building around the momentum towards becoming the global reserve currency. To accelerate this momentum, BCH is looking for enterprising developers, designers, marketers, and builders to harness the power of BCH in real products and services. Enter BCH Blaze. Blaze is an online hackathon for onboarding new builders to BCH via hands-on competition. Blaze is run entirely online, so everyone can be part of the full experience no matter where in the world they are. Anyone can register for free and form a team of 1 to 4 builders to compete in an 8-day hackathon for BCH prizes. A hackathon is a type of rapid product building team challenge. Teams can begin a brand new project or extend an existing project, striving to make the best innovative prototype or MVP of any kind of brand new BCH service. The only requirement is to make at least some use of one of the new BCH Layla upgrades, loops, functions, pay-to-script, and Bitwise, which lock in on November 15th, the first day of the hacking period. Preparation for the hackathon begins with an informational session on October 18th, followed by a weekly series of 3 workshops on Saturdays from BCH expert developers to onboard hackers to BCH developer tooling and answer questions. The Blaze hacking period proper starts on November 15th and runs 8 days to Sunday the 23rd of November. In the following week, judges, sponsors, and community members have time to review the submissions and cast their votes, followed by the final showcase stream where prizes and bounties are announced on Saturday the 29th. Experience in building cryptocurrency projects is helpful but absolutely not required. Between the workshop mentors, team members, and Blaze staff, beginners to BCH are encouraged to dive in. Plenty of support will be available for helping out with any difficulties in getting started. There are 4 ways to win BCH rewards by participating in Blaze. By winning first, second, or third place prizes, as judged by a panel of industry experts. By winning the community favorite category voted by attendees at the BCH Bliss conference in 2024 and 2025. By grabbing one of the bounties offered by sponsors for particular projects or features. And receiving donations or attracting the interest of investors by producing an impressive prototype hackathon submission and showing it off on the Showcase live stream. Blaze is designed to help kickstart new projects and then support their growth into the BCH ecosystem. Projects with high potential will be referred to the BCH1 Hackcelerator in January for seed funding to continue improving their project and launch into a business. Blaze winners also receive not only BCH, but bonus tickets to BCH Bliss, the in-person conference held in May 2026 to celebrate the Layla upgrade going live on mainnet. Winners and promising projects will receive support to prepare a 1.0 launch to coincide with the increased BCH interest around the Bliss conference. To find more information and register for Blaze, take a look at the Dora Hacks page linked in the description below, or navigate to bchblaze.cash. Join us today and help build the future of money. All right, so that's a basic summary of the information. One small note is that for people who are part of the Bliss 2024 or 2025 conferences and are wondering about the Blaze Vote tokens, those have not been sent out yet. We will send them out closer to the event, but the idea is that you'll all have cash tokens, and then when the projects are presenting during the showcase stream or during the hackathon period itself, if they publish something about their project, you can vote for their project by sending them your Blaze Vote cash tokens. And then, of course, the team at the end that has the most Blaze votes will win the community choice prize. So that's a nice bonus if you were part of either the Jessica or Velma Bliss conferences. Okay, on the next slide, we have once again our cash stamps giveaway. If your fastest finger, you can scan with your Selene wallet to claim some BCH here on the slide. Cash Stamps, one of our sponsors. We're very thankful to them for giving away some money and showcasing the power of BCH. And as mentioned in the Blaze video just there, we also have one of our other sponsors, BCH1, running a Hackcelerator in January 2026, which we will refer the most promising projects to. They released a new video this week, so we're just going to play that one as well too. So there we go. That is phase one, will be their onboarding period, which will be running during Blaze as they try and find promising projects from Blaze and elsewhere. So definitely be involved in Blaze, and you might get invited to this potential Hackcelerator with grants and funding, advice from mentors, all kinds of things. So that's just yet another small bonus for being involved, and thank you to them for sponsoring Blaze. Right, so that brings us to what we've got to do today, which is the Blaze workshop number one with our expert today is Mathieu Geukens. He is the author, I guess the coder of the CashScript wallet, the Cashanize wallet, the CashScript SDK, which I'm sure he'll be showing off today, and is looking to launch a stablecoin, parity USD, and has also been involved in the Cash Ninja NFTs. So you couldn't ask for somebody much more involved in the details of how BCH works at several layers of the stack. Welcome to the stream, Mathieu. I'll hand it over to you.
Yeah, thank you very much for that introduction, Jeremy. I'm super glad to be here, and indeed those are the projects I'm involved with. I think for today, CashScript will come up a few times. But first of all, I want to say that I think it's a great initiative, and I want to thank everyone who's watching and learning with these workshops. I'm very glad to be the first presenter, or during the first workshop. I think the timing is very good because the tooling has really been maturing on Bitcoin Cash. So now is the best time ever to do a hackathon. And in the recent years, we didn't have a prominent hackathon, so I'm very glad for Blaze to be pioneering in this front. Let's see. So my message overall is that now is the best time to start building. So for everyone now who's thinking about what's project, or as we'll talk about today, the BCH stack. So you'll learn all about which tools, libraries, what wallet, so the whole stack from start to finish, what it looks like. It's like now is the best time to learn about it because the technology is maturing. So many different people have put a lot of work in to making, fleshing out the details over the past upgrades as well. So now is really the best time. So with that as an introduction, I want to point everyone also to I have a YouTube channel where I cover similar topics. So not feature length like we'll do today. So today will be cover even more. But for example, my second last video was about how to build a dApp, a 15-minute overview. So we'll do something similar today, but we'll have more time but I can refer you to the YouTube channel afterwards if some of these topics, for example, with CashCrypt might be interesting to you. So I want to quickly plug this as a resource. If you afterwards think I wish I could hear more, well, there is some content available. Then the overview for today's workshop. So first of all, we'll give like a thorough overview of the BCH stack and every important component that you can use, so you at least feel comfortable with the terminology and the different components involved, and have an idea of how to even get started if you're new to the BCH ecosystem. Then in the second part, I will give a walkthrough of the Cash Ninjas dApp that we built a year ago, to give like a real world example of what a dApp looks like and which parts of the stack we used for that specific dApp. And then in the last part, there will be open questions. I understood that people can also send in questions throughout, but so in the last part is explicitly for any interactive questions that come up. All right, so then I can show the next slide, which has the high-level overview of what building a BCH app looks like. We'll dive more into detail of the specific components, but to give a high-level overview, maybe we'll start from the bottom, which is the blockchain layer. This is where the fully validating nodes communicate to each other. And on top of that, we have indexers, which they keep extra indexes, so database structures with extra data, and this is extra software you need to run on top of the full node. So together, these are kind of the two infrastructure layers, and there is public infrastructure available, but for if you get more serious, if you want to run a business, or if you like tinkering with these infrastructure, you can, this is something you can run yourself on a home server or on a cloud server. And the two notable indexers I listed here are ChainGraph and Electrum. Electrum is actually a protocol, but the Electrum family of indexers. And we'll talk more about this later. But so this is the base layer, the infrastructure layer. And this is probably not where the application developers will spend most of their time. This is kind of given when you start building, at least for most of you. And then we get on one layer higher, which are the libraries. So there's a bunch of libraries, and what do these libraries do? Well, they're for transaction building, they're for signing, so they often include some cryptography, they're for talking to these indexers, so they include some networking functionality. They also include address functionalities. For example, on BCH, we have cache addresses. You might want to check that something is the right format, or that it's a token-aware address, or you might want to decode an address to a locking bytecode, or you might want to, if you have a transaction hex, you might want to decode the transaction. So that's all kind of functionality that's commonly standardized in libraries. And there's libraries in many languages. But for the rest of today, we'll mainly talk about JavaScript and TypeScript, but other languages will also come up. So that's why this layer is kind of, it depends which language you use, which programming language, for which ecosystem of libraries you have access to. So that's kind of an important consideration for builders, is which language of libraries they pick. And then we have your application. So that's marked in green. That's the application layer. And so it relies on all these lower layers. But then, of course, you want to be able to interact with users. And users are on the highest level here, colored as light blue. And so this is the user wallet layer, where the end users live. And there's many BCH wallets, of course, so with different capabilities. So not all wallets will probably be able to work with your application unless your application only relies on very simple send and receive functionality. So the layer in between, I named it the payment and transaction protocols layer. 2 or 3 years ago, we would have mainly talked about BIP70 and the JSON payment protocol, which are the things on the right-hand side of the purple box. And these are still with mainly payment type of applications in mind. But now with Wallet Connect, we can have a way to really connect with a decentralized application and have your balances appear on the dApp, and then also do smart contract interactions. So these are more general than just payment protocols. They're really smart contract interaction layers. So yeah, this is an important layer between your application and between the end user wallet. And as we said, you'll need to think about which communication layer you need, because not all wallets support, for example, BIP70 or Wallet Connect. So that's an important consideration already. And this is the main layer between your application and the user wallet. So yeah, that is the high-level overview.
Can I just jump in here with one quick note, which is that for Blaze, you're allowed to build in any level of this stack. So Mathieu obviously has your application here in green. And if you're not super familiar with BCH, then definitely that's the way you should be thinking. But it's not a requirement for Blaze to build in that layer. So it's completely okay if somebody does a hackathon project, for instance, that is a BCH library that maybe makes things accessible in a new language, or if you're really advanced and you want to do something at the indexer layer or the blockchain layer, you can do that. If you want to do something at the payment transactional protocols layer, or you want to maybe build your own wallet or add an extension to an existing wallet, all of those will be valid projects for Blaze, as long as you meet the requirement to have some kind of example or integration with the Layla upgrade. But yes, for new users or new builders, highly recommended to stick to the green part, but that's not strictly required. So just to be clear.
All right, yeah, thank you for adding that. So yeah, indeed, the application layer would mainly be something for an end user application that needs to talk to your wallet. But of course, someone can you can also develop a wallet or a BCH library, or even I know there's people still innovating also in these layer on the payments and transaction protocols. So of course, there's still innovation happening all throughout the stack. So one thing I highly recommend for people is, before they dive into application development, is to try out some of the existing applications on BCH, because that will quickly give you an idea of what's already out there. And so I built the Tokenaut website, which has one page with the different tabs on BCH. And so you can find it on tokenaut.cash. And there's a whole list with 2 columns. The first column represents whether the dApp, I think, has Wallet Connect, and the second column represents whether the dApp is open source. So if they have the second column ticked, you can even look at the source code to see how it's fully working under the hood, or some might be partially open source with only some components open source, so a source code available. So why I think this is important is because if you are not familiar with the BCH ecosystem, you might not be aware of which different solutions are available. For example, many of these newer applications which use smart contracts, they will use Wallet Connect, so they will all have green checks in the first column. But some other decentralized apps, for example, like Cash Fusion, is built into wallets, or BCH Bull, it's a built-in web wallet. So there's different designs possible, and it's more intuitive to understand this, or what users are already familiar with, if you have a broad idea of which apps are already out there. And then besides the applications, it's also very good to be familiar, at least on a high level, with the wallets. So yeah, on that slide, you see an overview. It's from the bitcoincash.org website. And you see an overview of some of the wallets. The list is much longer, but some of the prominent wallets used in the Bitcoin Cash ecosystem, of course, are these first ones. So Electron Cash, Cashnice, Paytaka, Sapit, Selene, Bitcoin.com. I'll also include Edge and Stack wallets. Of course, the list is much longer, but these are the ones used by users who are very active in the BCH ecosystem because they have some of these extra functionality like we talked about, for example, Wallet Connect or being able to claim from QR codes with cash stamps and functionality like that. So it's also important to roughly be aware of what kind of wallets people use and what capability these wallets have. So this will give you a much better understanding of what you're able to build if you on a high level understand the wallets and the different applications, because that kind of gives you a baseline of what other people have done, what's available that you can plug into. And of course, you don't need to be compatible with every wallet out there, because then you can probably only rely on send and receive functionality. But it's also fine to be tightly integrated to one wallet. Of course, the more interoperable and open your application is, the more different wallets you can support, the better, of course. So yeah, this is what I want to show about the wallet and the dApps.
Couple things to add just on the wallets there, just quickly. So, of course, some of these wallets are also open source, Selene, Cashnize, Paytaka, Electron Cash as well. So if anybody is interested in the mechanisms of how any of these things work, you can try the application and then literally just go and look at the code and see how everything fits together, which might be an inspiration for you in either building your own wallet app or your own wallet. And I also thought maybe, Jerry, if you want to chime in here about the opt-in wallet as well, it's not listed in here. And that might be especially useful because you need to have wallets that are good support for smart contracts, and also for ChipNet is where a lot of the development is going to be had. So like Selene, for instance, has send and receive support and all of that for ChipNet and the test nets. So you can test your coins and your apps on that. So with the Layla building for Blaze, we're not going to be doing it. You can do send and receive and so forth live on mainnet, but to use the upcoming upgrades, you'll need to be using ChipNet, and not all the wallets support that. Jerry, do you want to add something there maybe?
Yeah, like the my opt-in wallet does support ChipNet and the cash script contracts. We just need to upgrade it to or however to manage it. But yeah, definitely the wallet side is really the entry point to all the users interacting with it. So yeah, it's a really important feature to have.
Mathieu, does Cashnize, I assume, has ChipNet support as well too?
Yeah, there's a developer setting. And also what people have done in the past. So for example, for Electron Cash, you can create Python plugins. But what people have done for other open source wallets is you can actually just fork them. And if your feature you think it kind of needs to be built into a wallet, then you can kind of start that work. You can directly integrate. I know people have forked Cashnize. I think the same has probably happened, at least to play around with it for Selene. So yeah, that's a great way to understand how wallets work and familiarize yourself with that part of the code base if you want. But I think there's also a lot of value in apps which are not tied to any specific wallet, because of course all wallets try to build a user base. So to have one more wallet, it might be hard to build your initial user base. And it might be easier to connect to the existing users out there. So that's also one consideration, is how general you can make it, how many wallets you can easily integrate, or whether you need custom integration or even need to start a new wallet, which I would say that's quite a big hurdle, because developing a wallet just takes a long time. So yeah, I think that covers the wallet part of the stack. And then I wanted to mention a great resource called developers.cash. So it's a website, and this lists kind of the different projects out there for the different parts of the stack. So in the screenshot, I highlighted libraries, and then you will see a long list of all the different libraries out there in the different languages. So you will see libraries in Go, in Python, in JavaScript, in C#, in whatever language. There's probably some BCH library out there. So this is quite a long list. Or if you're more interested in protocols people have written up, like standards or in Node software. So you can click these little filters, and then you can very easily familiarize yourself as a developer with useful resources and tooling that's already out there. So this is an invaluable resource. So I definitely want to point new builders to developers.cash because this is kind of your reference and has an exhaustive list of everything you might want to use.
All right, and on our next slide, we've got yet another cash stamp. So if you're on the ball and you're paying attention, there's a small amount of BCH there that anybody could just pick up today. And that's actually a good example of things being built into Selene. Selene is open source, and Callisti and I are working on it, but the cash stamps team actually really wanted to get their product integrated into more wallets, but of course the wallet teams are all busy and have a lot of things that are already on the agenda. So they actually did a fork, like you were saying, and they made it an upgrade, a modification that Selene could then easily scan the cash stamps, and they submitted it to us, and we reviewed it and we put it in, which was amazing because we got that feature essentially for free. But it just goes to show that once you've made a project, then it's possible that you can encourage the wallet developers to build it into their wallet, or sometimes you can just do the integration for them, and then you suddenly have a slick integration to a much larger user base when all the groundwork has been done for you in terms of making the wallet and doing the release process and marketing it and advertising it, and then you're straight into it. So I think that's just one good example. All right, back to you, Mathieu.
Yeah, so to dive a little deeper into the BCH stack, this is very similar to what we saw before, but this is specifically for building a decentralized app using smart contracts. So notice here it just has a wallet connect for the transaction protocol, whereas the other ones, as we said, are more for simple payments. This one is also focusing because your dApp will run in a browser, most likely. So you'll be using web technology. So this focuses on the stack for JavaScript and TypeScript. So for the web technology, of course, the full nodes layer is the same. I want to point out that here for the indexer, it's very common to use the Fulcrum indexer, which is an instance, an implementation of the Electrum protocol. So this is kind of the standard, the most scalable, reliable. And there exist other indexes, which we will talk about in a bit. But for the standard stack, the thing that's most production proven, if you would look like what existing dApps use, then it's the Fulcrum indexer, which implements the Electrum protocol. And then on the library side, if we're talking about smart contracts and we're talking about JavaScript, then the core element is libauth, the libauth library by Jason Dreisner, which is pretty low level, but it's also what's all the relevant wallets, for example, Selene, Cashanize, Petaka, I think also Optin, all the JavaScript wallets, they also rely on libauth. So this is the kind of a core low-level BCH JavaScript library. And then the two other libraries mentioned here on the slide, CashScript and mainnet.js, you can think of them kind of as wrappers or building on top of libauth. So they both depend on libauth very heavily, but they make it much more easily accessible. For example, to talk about mainnet.js, mainnet.js has an easy wallet class, and so you can just do wallet.send, whereas if you use libauth directly, then you're really configuring the whole transaction piece by piece, which gives you the most control, but is often overwhelming if you simply want to do simple sends or have automatic change outputs and have automatic selection for UTXO. So mainnet.js is great for if you want to get started quickly with sends and receive, or if you quickly want to mint an NFT, like all the basic functionality is made super easy by mainnet.js. And then CashScript has two parts. It has the CashScript SDK, which is in TypeScript, and this is a wrapper on libauth, which allows you to transaction build with smart contracts. We'll talk about the CashScript transaction builder in a bit. And then another part of CashScript, which is not strictly in TypeScript, is the CashScript language itself, which you can compare to Solidity. So it's a new language, new syntax, but we'll talk a bit more about it in a few slides. So this is kind of the standard, as I see it at least, the standard BCH stack for a decentralized application. And it's also what I use myself. So I'm very familiar with all the layers, except for maybe the infrastructure layer, because it's not always necessary to run all the infrastructure yourself. In BCH, there is publicly available infrastructure like full nodes and fulcrum services, which you can use to initially get started. So if you're, of course, very interested in running infrastructure or how the infrastructure layer works, then feel free to dive into this. But as a builder, you can also just take it for granted and use the existing infrastructure and kind of then get started on either on libauth for some utilities, but you will mainly, as I see it, interact with these higher level wrapper libraries like main.js and the CashScript SDK. So here is an overview of some of what we just discussed. So the dApp stack for BCH is mainly in TypeScript and JS. I think Python is also viable, but for some of these other languages, there's just not enough integration with CashScript and smart contracts. So if you want to build an app which does not rely on smart contracts, then I do know there is a lot of functionality, for example, in Go available for address conversion, but specifically for smart contract functionality, I think JavaScript will be the main pick, or Python, if you're familiar with this. As I mentioned, libauth is the core of this JavaScript functionality, and we have you can see CashScript SDK and main.js as wrappers. Then lastly, this last point I do want to mention, the CashScript SDK is very handy for contract interaction, so smart contract interaction, or just custom transactions where you do something special. Maybe use special lock times or special SIG hash flags or special signing. You do something special, then the CashScript SDK makes this easy for you. Whereas if you just want easy, normal sends with change outputs, then main.js is a great option. So yeah, this is how I would give an overview of the JavaScript ecosystem.
And just a quick note as well on that is that, of course, Blaze wants to encourage the BCH ecosystem to expand out to new languages and new technology, of course. So at its current sort of size and maturity level, this is where most of the available resources are. So for the majority of people, that might be a good place to start. But of course, if you are super passionate about BCH or about a different programming language and you want to bring that to the community, that's very, very highly encouraged. And from the three judges, I'm speaking a little bit on their behalf, but from my impression, knowing those three guys, I think they would all be probably likely highly impressed if somebody did a fresh integration of some lower level tooling or a library wrapper or something like that in a brand new programming language that they saw had potential to be supported, and open that up to a whole new community of builders. So that's one thing to keep in mind. That's more for people who are very, very passionate about a particular tech stack or who are familiar with the details of that. But it's certainly one viable option. But most people should probably go where the tooling and support already is, for sure.
Yeah, and then to continue on these different libraries, I have included some screenshots of the documentation. So here you can see a screenshot of the libauth documentation. You will be easily, I think libauth.org is where you can find it. As you can see, just on the left-hand side, this the API of the things exported is already pretty low level. So you can see, for example, cache address format encoding, or authentication errors, or the bit regrouping, or compiler things that are exported. So I just want to say so that this is what the documentation looks like, but it's quite low level. Then I also have a screenshot of what main.js the documentation looks like. I scroll down a bit to show how instantiating a wallet looks like here. So you just do wallet equals await wallet.new random, or from seed, or from with. So it makes it just very easy, even if you're not familiar with JavaScript. yeah, this is just very easy to see what is going on. It also has cash tokens support, and so makes it very easy to get started with cash tokens. As well, it has network functionality integrated with Fulcrum. So as you can see on the left-hand side, the overview, it says getting the balance, sending money, watching for transactions. So this is all made very easy by mainnet.js, and you can find this at the website mainnet.cash. So yeah, that's another point that I want to give for people, an easy place to get started and maybe get an idea of what's possible. And then I want to give kind of an introduction into smart contracts and CashCrypt. So I would say CashCrypt is like BCH's Solidity. It's what people use to write smart contracts. And if you're not familiar with writing smart contracts, you can just get started with writing contracts, dummy contracts, which are just evaluated true. And then you can kind of focus on the transaction building or on the wallet connect parts, and your contracts are not doing anything yet, but then you can later make the specific contracts, because this will require you to learn the CashCrypt syntax and to compile the contracts. So it's a little learning curve. But to just get started, you can kind of use placeholders, which will always evaluate it true, and then you can continue working on, for example, the transaction building logic, where, for example, you add some BCH and some token as an input, and then you send the token somewhere and the BCH somewhere else, or the BCH gets pulled together somehow. So yeah, you can focus on the transaction building without having to worry about learning the CashCrypt syntax this way by just using dummy contracts. So that's kind of a hint or a tip that I want to give for people who might want to try the stack but are not sure about diving deep into the contracts immediately. This way you can kind of put off the contract specific stuff for a while you focus on figuring out the stack and the transaction building and maybe wallet connect, and then you can revisit the exact contract implementation, and because the dummy contracts will always evaluate it too. And then secondly, there's also Spedden. Spedden would be the better option than CashCrypt if your focus is on multi-chain stuff. So if you want to integrate with other networks like eCash or BTC or Lotus, then you have to check out the Spedden language. I'm not sure if the tooling is as good, but I just want to mention it as an option for cross-chain smart contract stuff. Then I have a few screenshots for an overview of the CashCrypt functionality. And this is actually a first that I'm sharing here on the workshop. So we have a next version of CashCrypt out with loop support. So it's still, as it says, in beta, and it's somewhat limited because this is very new and it's only available on ChipNet. So you do have to connect to the ChipNet network to be able to use this. But as you can see, it's a do-while syntax is the first looping syntax we added to CashCrypt, available in this version 0.13. And here is a simple example of what CashCrypt looks like. You first have a Pragma version, similar to what Solidity does, where you specify the version. Then you have a contract, and a contract can have multiple functions, which is how you would be able to spend the money, to spend the BCH. And so this contract is called no tokens allowed. And in the one spend function, the loop loops over all the inputs. You can see it indexes over the inputs, and then it requires that each input does not have any tokens. So this is a contract that you can spend the money as long as you don't add any tokens in the transaction, which of course might not have any direct use, but it's an example of how you can use the looping syntax together with BCH's native introspection. And I guess it's also to showcase that CashCrypt is not crazy advanced. It reads like many other languages and a bit like English. So I'm sure people can figure it out. And especially if one of the goals of Blaze is to encourage people to look into or try out the new features, then this loops functionality, I think, will be very interesting for people to read over. So this is in the cashcrypt.org documentation on the contract structure. And then I included a few more CashCrypt related things. So first of all, the CashCrypt playground. As you can see on the left-hand side, we have, again, a CashCrypt contract. It's one of the default examples. So if you go to the CashCrypt playground, then you will also be able to load this escrow example, and you can also see a link to the documentation page on the website. And what's nice about the CashScript Playground is it does start with learning CashScript. So if you're ready to deep dive into CashScript, then here is where you first write the contract. But then to actually spend from the contract, you need to go to the transaction builder. So that's the second screenshot. And this will be new for people who are used to EVM style smart contracts. So if you're used to the account model, I highly encourage the CashScript Playground, not specifically for the contract functionality. So you can write a very simple dummy contract or just that there's one or two checks. But then the transaction building is really where it's at, because you need to think in the UTXO model, you need to think in inputs and outputs. And inputs get kind of destroyed and the outputs get created, which is why they talk about the UTXO set, because things leave the UTXO set and new new unspent transaction outputs get created. And so if you think about what does a smart contract do, for example, the smart contract with the loop that we just saw, is if you add one input, which says there can be no tokens, then you can add other inputs or other contracts, but the one input will always evaluate its own script. So imagine we add two more contracts to the transaction, and one of them is the no tokens contract. Then if the second contract has a token in the input, so the UTXO has a token, then our first loop contract will fail evaluation. So the transaction will be invalid and rejected by the network. So when is a transaction valid? It's valid when all the input scripts pass. So, for example, a common thing we see in designs of more advanced applications, like the Parity USD stablecoin I'm building, is that, for example, you have three inputs, and input 2 actually checks, am I connected to input 1, and it starts indexing at 0. So let's say input 2 checks that that there's input 0 and input 1 also in the same transaction. So you can have only partial scripts, but then they need to be linked to other inputs, and together they totally restrict the transaction shape. So I think that's the right mental model, is you add inputs, each input has restrictions, and together you want to restrict the transaction shape. So of course the simple contracts are all dummies and then everything is allowed. But once you start adding inputs with real restrictions, you're saying, oh, this type of NFT needs to be created, and this money needs to be sent to the pool, and this state, this NFT data needs to change, the state needs to be updated. So yeah, that's a lot of info, but it's to say that this transaction builder will really help you to get the right mental model, especially when you come from EVM, to understand the UTXO chains. Yeah, anything to add, Jeremy? Because I thought.
Yes. So in the What is BCH Blaze video, right at the start, there was just a very small mention about BCH is the most powerful and efficient UTXO layer 1 cryptocurrency that exists anywhere. It just flat out is the best, and part of the Layla upgrade that we are locking in with this hackathon on starting November 15th. And then building and releasing next year in May of 2026 is increasing that efficiency of the UTXO model. Now, the main advantage over the EVM for people who might look at this and think, well, this all seems very, complicated and arcane, is that you've massively increased the scalability and the throughput, which also lowers fees. So it's much cheaper to both build and deploy on UTXO chains than on EVM. And the advantage you get from building in this way, as well as thinking about things from a different perspective, is that it becomes easier to scale your app. A lot of people deploy EVM apps, or they spend a lot of money working on EVM stuff. And then even then their app has to be viable in quite an environment of high fluctuating fees, or it's not scalable and they end up moving to layer 2s and all kinds of things. And you can just completely avoid that by working with BCH, which is one of the things the network offers. And we also had that What is BCH Blaze video. We will have an upcoming video in a couple of weeks, which breaks down the full differences between EVM and UTXO chains for people who are confused about that further.
All right, yeah, perfect. Indeed, so the scalability and the low transaction fees, having high throughput, that's indeed a key differentiator of BCH. So thank you for adding that context. So this was showcasing the transaction builder visually. Now on the next slide, there's the documentation on the cashcrypt.org website of using this transaction builder. So what we just saw was just a visual interface for kind of doing the things that you can do here with code. So if you look at the right-hand side, you can see transaction building. You have add input, add inputs, add output, add op return output, set the lock time, send, and then you can do different things with your transaction builder. You can send, you can build, you can debug, you can get a bitauth URI, which is kind of a link for debugging, and then you can even generate a wallet connect transaction object. So maybe let's talk about these items in a bit more detail. In the next slide, we have an example of what such a completed transaction looks like. So first, we need some addresses and some private keys if you want to be able to spend from this transaction setup. So the first line you see in the JavaScript code here are imports. And then it says contract.getUTXO. So this will make a network request. By default, this will be to Fulcrum. And then you have the contract UTXOs. Then we also get the user's UTXO. So this is a user interacting with contracts. And then the user is called Alice. So we get the Alice's UTXOs in her wallet. And then we start the transaction building. So for this, we of course use the transaction builder class, and we do transaction builder add input, and then we add as the first input, this is a contract input. And so first you provide the UTXO, so where are you spending the money from? And then the second argument is how do you unlock this money? So you see here the second argument is contract.unlock.spend, and then you provide some arguments to be able to spend from this contract. So in this case, we provide Alice's template for a signing template, and we provide some amount. And in the second input we add here is an input from Alice's wallet. And of course, only Alice can unlock this. So it has Alice template.unlock. So this is again, we're providing two things, the UTXO itself and an unlocker, which is why it's called .unlock. And then here to continue the transaction building, we also add one output and an op return output, and we set a maximum fee. And then finally we say .send, and this will use the network provider you configured. So if you want to do test on ChipNet, this would send your transaction to ChipNet, and either you get back the succeeding transaction ID, or you get, in case your transaction was invalid and one of the input scripts fails validation, like we talked about before. If one of the inputs fails validation, then the transaction is invalid, and so you get back an error message from the full node. And then so I have another screenshot which shows specifically how you can easily integrate with Wallet Connect. So this is slightly more involved, but still very simple. You still use the same transaction builder. You still add inputs and outputs in the same place. But the main differentiator with a Wallet Connect is that you do not have access to the user's private keys, of course. So you cannot easily do alice.unlock or whatever, because Alice will not, you don't have access to Alice's private signing info. So here we use placeholders instead. And you can see there's 3 placeholders that we use for this example. We use the placeholder unlocker, the placeholder public key, and the placeholder signature. And we do the same transaction building like before, but instead of using real Alice data, we now use the placeholders. And then instead of .send, because of course it would be invalid with these placeholders, instead of sending the transaction, we use transaction. This is at the very bottom of the screenshot. You can see the Wallet Connect transaction object equals the transaction builder dot generate Wallet Connect transaction object. So you just call something simple on the transaction builder, and it will build the whole transaction, including the placeholders. And then you are only one Wallet Connect interaction away from the user filling in these placeholders. So this is when the user would see a Wallet Connect pop-up, and they would press sign. And what happens then behind the scenes is that Celine or Cashnice or your BCH Wallet Connect wallet, it fills in these placeholders, and then you have a configuration. Either you set broadcast to true, which means that the wallet will automatically broadcast the transaction, or you can say broadcast false, and then the dApp gets just a signed message back. And then you also have a user prompt, which is simply the pop-up that the user sees in his wallets before signing. And here it says example contract transaction. So it would say something signing the NFT mint or minting a Cash Ninja or something. It would have a user instruction. So it's still pretty easy to integrate. And as it says here in green in the tip, we have a whole Wallet Connect guide. So if you want to integrate with Wallet Connect, I highly recommend checking out that extra documentation. That we won't go over now, but then you know it's there.
And we have another cash stamp. So if you're paying attention on the stream here, you're gonna jump in there, scan away with your wallet, and pick up some extra sats. Also, shout out to Janet and her parrots in the chat, who says has arrived from Narain's post. So thank you very much to Narain, and welcome to Janet and her parrots for joining the stream to learn about BCH. Very glad to have you.
All right. Then to continue, we talked a lot about the JavaScript and TypeScript tooling. Of course, TypeScript being just the typed version, the typed superset of JavaScript. But now to shift gears a bit, I want to give a brief overview of Python. I have not developed any dApps myself with Python, but on I know the ecosystem a bit. And on developer.cash, the website we showed earlier, you can find a whole overview. But for Python specifically, I want to mention that the Bitcache library is a bit the equivalent of mainnet.js for Python. So, and it has documentation. I'm sure you will be able to find the website for it. And then there is also a not yet stable but upcoming CacheScript -Pi version, which might be considered stable before the Blaze hackathon fully starts. So. There might be updates around that, but there is integration with CacheScript and Python. There's also an open source project from Paytaka called the Paytaka BCMR Explorer, which bridges Python and JavaScript. So it does use some CacheScript stuff, some CacheScript SDK functions, but it's able to call these from JavaScript. So if you're thinking about building in Python, then these might be some handy references. Either directly integrate with the upcoming CacheScript Pi, or make a bridge somehow and maybe then refer to Paytaka's codebase for the BCMR Explorer if you're a Python developer. Then I want to talk about these the indexers. So this was the layer just above the full node. So the full node is the fully validating Bitcoin Cash node, which has the whole history. And the indexer specifically keeps address balances easily available for lookup. So this is what wallets use most of the time to quickly see different users' balances. So as we discussed before, the Electrum protocol is kind of the default. There's also true for Bitcoin BTC. And for BCH specifically, the Fulcrum implementation is most prominent and is very stable. If you're using a JavaScript or a TypeScript library and you want only the functionality to communicate to the Electrum servers, you can use the @Electrum -cache library, which actually has multiple packages. But yeah, so there's easy libraries available to work with Electrum. And then in my opening slides, I also mentioned Chain Graph. Chain Graph is great and has a lot more data available. So if you want to visualize data, or you want to get you want to, for example, query all op returns which are on the blockchain, or you want to query all transactions which have more than 7 outputs. These are the type of queries you can create with Chain Graph. So it's great and very flexible. It's not quite production ready. So if your app does not strictly need it, I would stick to Electrum or Fulcrum specifically. But if you want to do some more experimental or novel stuff, then Chain Graph might have all the data available in a very flexible way. So I do want to mention Chain Graph specifically. And then other alternatives which can be used as indexers are the BCHD full node, which has an indexer integrated, the Knut full node on Bitcoin Cash, which also has an indexer integrated, and lastly BCHC, which is using the chronic indexer. So these are all three more novel options and are not, to my knowledge, used in production systems, but can be very interesting to know about for niche applications, or if they specifically offer something that your application can really use. Then another part of the stack that we haven't discussed before is the BCMR. And BCMR stands for Bitcoin Cash Metadata Registry. And this is what you will want to look into. This is a specification, and a standard. So for how to do metadata for cash tokens. So if you want to create a token or do something interesting with tokens in users' wallets, then you will definitely want to look into this specification. It's quite detailed, so this presentation is not about the specifics of BCMR, but I highly recommend when you do anything with cash tokens to give the specification a read. And this is also what's integrated in the different cash tokens wallets. So for example, Selene, Cashanize, and others. So this is how you get your tokens to be compatible and nicely display your, for example, your image, your description, your token name, etc. So this is called BCMR, and I think it's important for builders to know about.
Can you maybe elaborate a little bit on cash tokens for people coming from other ecosystems? In my mind, it's very easy for people to get led astray, maybe by the name or by their existing preconceptions, but cash tokens kind of encompasses at least 3 different things. You can issue fungible tokens, like people might be familiar with Shiba Inu or whatever, any kind of fungible token. You can also issue a non-fungible token like CryptoPunk series or things that people are wanting. And then thirdly, you can also issue tokens to communicate within your app or to other BCH apps, which are tokens in the network level sense, but they aren't tokens in the sense that people think about, oh, I'm going to buy this pump.fun token. And those things also overlap, right? You can have NFTs that are just tradable and that everybody can have fun, buying or having cool artwork or whatever. But then they might also have additional functionality if used within specific apps. For instance, we have the Bliss NFTs that I mentioned. We use those that people can buy them on TapSwap, and then they come to Bliss and it's their ticket to get into the conference. But then later also it has bonus functionality. For instance, you can use it as your profile picture on BCH Gurus. And of course, you'll be getting Blaze Vote tokens airdropped to it. So maybe just a brief word about the power of cash tokens and how people cannot get trapped into thinking of them too much like they might be used to on other chains.
Yeah, so I guess first, it's on BCH, there is a distinction between a contract and a token. On EVM, that's not always the case. On EVM, you have ERC20 for fungibles or ERC721 for NFTs, and so a contract is a token, but that's not the case. That's not the case with cash tokens. These 2 types Jeremy mentioned, fungibles and NFTs, are both primitives. So this means it's not a token standard. It's also not a contract. These are part of your UTXO. So I guess we briefly already mentioned this in the loops example. So when you loop over the inputs, then your cash token is part of this UTXO. So a UTXO can have Bitcoin Cash, and it also can have a token, either an NFT or a fungible. And if it's the same category, this is already maybe getting into the details, but it can also have both an NFT and a fungible if it's of the same category. And this is important for smart contract developers. So a contract can, of course, hold tokens, just like a contract can hold Bitcoin Cash, but a contract can also hold an NFT with mutable data. And mutable means that the contract itself can update the data in the NFT commitment field over time. So, for example, one use case for this, if you have a token mint and people can mint, there's a collection of 10,000 NFTs, you want, of course, the contract to stop creating new NFTs after number 10,000. And how you would do this specifically is the contract needs to remember how many NFTs have I already created. And this is what we call state. And so it just keeps a simple counter. If you're a web developer, you will know that every web demo starts with a React counter example where you keep a counter in the state. This is similar. You keep some state. which is a counter in your smart contracts, and it just only adds one each with each interaction. And this is kept immutable data because, of course, immutable NFTs, they can never update their own data. They are, for example, if you mint number 5, you can never change this to say that you minted number 10. But the contract itself, it will update its own data and then remember how many NFTs it's minted. And if it sees that it minted already 10,000, then it will not allow any additional mints. So this is the use case for contract authors. And of course, normal users, they're used to seeing fungibles and NFTs in their wallets. So I guess I would refer back to trying a few of the wallets and also specifically trying cash tokens. We try to send and receive a cash token, and then it will feel much more intuitive what a cash token specifically is. Did that do it justice, Jeremy?
Yes, I think so. And I mean, there's a lot of untapped power here, and nobody has ever got remotely close to imagining all the different things that can be done with cash tokens. But we are really looking forward to, in the Blaze Hackathon, seeing what people can come up with. And like I mentioned before, for me, I think it's the most cool when tokens start to interact between multiple different apps. So at the moment, if you issue your own fungible token, you can make a ticker and make a image for it and set the supply and so forth. And then you can go and list it on Cauldron, right? So you are already integrating into different apps there, but you can look at what are the other existing apps and what are the existing tokens, and maybe your app would then be able to take in a token from any of the other projects and either change it or interact with it in some way. One of the bounties that I have put up for one BCH, which you can find on Dora Hacks on the bounties tab, is I think it would be awesome if there was some kind of token battling game that people could make their own NFT and then power it up with more fungible tokens and then battle them against each other somehow. So there's money to be won if you can make an impressive cash tokens apps that lets people interact with and any of those different tokens, and perhaps different tokens have different attributes, and there's just an endless field of creativity there. So I'm looking forward to seeing what people come up with on that regard.
Yeah, definitely agree that there's a lot of untapped potential with cash tokens. This is a great area for exploration for people who want to build something cool and interesting. Definitely deeply look into cash tokens. And then, as we said, the BCMR standard, which is how you get to have your cash token to actually have a name and an icon, which of course is very important for users.
So Mathieu, we have a quick question from the chat. Carl says, can we expect functions and pay to script in cash script before the hackathon?
No, that won't be available. What will be available is you can experiment with pay to script in the sense that this compiles just the same in cash script, and we as part of the pay to script update, also some of the VM limits were changed. For example, you can now include more states in an NFT commitment, so more data. And with cash script, we did make all these adjustments, and then we added loops. But functions will only be available, we hope, by activation, but it might be only by the November update. By November. So for people specifically interested in the cash script timeline, the best document I can refer to is our ongoing flip starter. Not for the fundraising specifically, but just for the roadmap, because of course integrating the functions chip will take some time on our part, and also I expect, of course, the Blaze Hackathon judges to be understanding that not all features are available yet in cash script. They are available in libauth, and so you can use the BitAuth IDE, which is the quite low level, but for people who are very interested in opcodes and more the assembly type of optimizations and assembly instructions, I would refer them to the BitAuth IDE.
Yes, so that is to say, like Mathieu says, the judges are understanding that we are sort of pushing the boundaries, and that's part of the idea of Blaze. We could have made it that there was no strict requirements to use the Layla upgrades, but we wanted to make that our sort of one and only requirement. Firstly, to ensure that people are actually doing a Bitcoin Cash related project, but also to build interest in those different things. And to the extent that tooling is available, that's because we're working at the very cutting edge of the protocol advancement, and there isn't necessarily always the best tooling. We're doing what we can to make that as accessible and easy as possible, but for people who are very interested, it would also be a fantastic project in Blaze, similar to what I mentioned before with different languages. You could make library for different languages. Well, you could make it your Blaze hackathon project to add functions as a PR to CashScript, for example. You're allowed to do PRs to existing projects, make forks of existing projects, or even start a new project that made functions available to people more easily. Somehow that's all fruit for exploration.
Right, and of course, people can also ask questions in the CashCrypt Telegram group. I'm sure there will be also other Telegram groups where questions can be asked, but for CashCrypt specifically, there is a dedicated Telegram group where questions will receive swift answers. All right, so in the next slide, I have the Cash Token Studio, which is this is a screenshot, and this is one of the dApps that was listed on Tokenaut. And this allows you with Wallet Connect to very easily create a token with metadata. So if you're interested in doing something with cash tokens with metadata, this is the quickest way to get started. So I quickly want to highlight the Cash Token Studio as a way to get metadata for your applications. Then I have a bunch of project IDs, but they don't all conform to the requirement of using the new upgrades. So take these with a grain of salt. I'll quickly go over them just because I think they're interesting IDs in general, but yeah, you might have to confirm with the judges to what extent they're allowed. One thing I think is interesting to have an address analyzer to see, for example, you can paste in an address and then see when did this address first get active, what dApps has it interacted with. So, for example, it can also give you a privacy score, how bad is your address reuse or a thing like that. I think that's an interesting idea. Also, on Bitcoin Cash, we have a double spend proofs. It might be interesting to have a website checker for something like this. Also, a visualization maybe of different AMM curves. So AMMs, of course, are the famous DEXs popularized by on Ethereum and EVM, and this is still quite complex, the economics behind it. So I think a visualization can really help both builders themselves to understand what's happening, but also others to play around. Maybe even for traders, this could be a handy tool. And then I have a bunch of Wallet Connect apps, which I would kind of like to see, which is a vaulting app, a last will inheritance app, a Mecenas recurring payments app, a HODL app, an AnyHedge app with Wallet Connect. And so kind of my high level idea that helps if you've never done something with the BCH stack is you can take an existing contract, for example, this last will inheritance contract, and you can make it something with Wallet Connect. So you kind of modernize it so it works with the newer features. I think it could probably easily be upgraded also to use a new contract where you do use something like loops or functions. But as a quick start, I think taking an existing contract and making it available through Wallet Connect so it can easily be used in any wallet, whereas before it was only, I think, an Electron Cash plugin, so it was not accessible to many users. So yeah, these are just some random project ideas that were on my mind when making these slides. Then as a general, I think, advice for the hackathon is cut out any extras. There's not unlimited time, so think wisely about your focus. So avoid novelty except where it's core to your ID. For example, don't try all the new protocols or all the new wallets or all the new standards or all the new indexers or all the new languages. So kind of pick one thing where you want to innovate and try to do everything else kind of as standard as possible, because if you pick multiple things where you innovate, then it might be that you don't have the time to do any one of them properly. So in similar vein, I suggest maybe following the path of least resistance, because a hackathon in large part it's about managing time, and you don't have the time to reinvent the whole stack from scratch. So try to go where others have gone before you, or if you develop some tooling, then use the tools that kind of that you can leverage to the fullest extent. And also, in the same vein, integrate with existing wallets and standards. Use public infrastructure, because running your own infrastructure, it adds headache and costs time. And for your hackathon project, for your Blaze project, it will probably not be worth it to start running your own servers. And then, at the risk of repeating myself, try to do only one novel thing, not many novel things at the same time, just to not spread yourself thin. And then I would suggest you test on chipnet or mocknet. It's very easy to switch to mainnet, although not for some of the new functionality, which is not even available on mainnet. But I would highly discourage testing on mainnet, even though it's simple and easy. It's just because you will do less testing if it costs a few cents every time you do a test, right? You want to be able to test with large amounts, you want to be able to test often. So for this, I recommend the chipnet network, which of course also has all the new functionality.
All right, and we have one more cash stamp coming up for a user who's quick on the draw. There, something to mention about Mathieu's point there is, so Blaze is 8 days. The hacking period is from Saturday the 15th until Sunday the 23rd. So you're not super pressed for time in the sense of it's a mad rush to do everything in 24 or 48 hours. But nevertheless, you don't want to spend, a day or two messing around with infrastructure or trying to reinvent the wheel on different elements. So I think it is very good and pertinent advice to try and skip over that as much as possible by using the existing tooling and infrastructure. Those things are all there for a reason. And of course, there's already existing teams and resources behind those. So if you try and use those, like you said, Mathieu mentioned, you can then reach out to them if you have any problems, and they will help you upskill on their project. They will answer how to use things. They will point you in the right direction. They might already have documentation, all these things. So instead of reinventing the wheel, try and get the most leverage and the most benefit you can from the existing stuff that's available. And to the extent that you find questions you have that are not answered, or that people don't know how to easily solve, that provides feedback to then those services, and they will be quite interested and excited. And maybe that's even one way for you to get hired into the ecosystem, is if you're asking good questions and people see, whether from that project or another project, everybody watches everyone, they will all see that you're engaged and interested and you're asking good questions and you're curious. So I highly recommend engaging with the existing projects and infrastructure, because it all already exists for a reason.
Let's see. So an app ID in 2 steps, as I mentioned before, you can take an app that exists before there was Bitcoin Cash Wallet Connect. And what I really like to see, but it's personal, of course, is to take a concept that was already tried before, but was not good enough at the time, and then just make the same thing, because oftentimes the contracts are open source. A lot of the work in the design already went into it. Make it available with Wallet Connect. And I think definitely, as Jeremy said, in 8-day time period, such an idea cuts down the scope by a lot, because you already know what you want to build. You want to make it more accessible, and you're leveraging a new communication protocol. So that was what I mentioned before in 2 steps. Then in the next slide, there's some categories. So if you don't have any ideas, these are just very broad categories, but that cool things can be done with. For example, if you need some inspiration, look into cash tokens. There's definitely things, very interesting things that can be done with cash tokens. So a category is just do something with cash tokens. Another thing is very few people have done actually the deep dive in smart contracts. So I'm very happy that with this hackathon, there is a special focus on smart contracts and smart contract functionality. So something with contracts, that's also just a category that is underexplored in my opinion. Another thing that's interesting, I think, is as I said, most people use just the fulcrum indexer and the fulcrum data, but it's quite limited in the interesting insights you can gain from it. So if you use another indexer, then you might be able to get access to interesting data that other people simply are not able to visualize or are not able to show. So something interesting with indexer data, I think, for example, for smart contracts, you could easily visualize how many interactions there were with, for example, the Cauldron index, or which are the most popular pools, or things like this, which might be hard with the normal indexers, but with extra indexer data available, you might be able to make some cool or interesting visualizations. But for example, if someone wants to know how many times has the new opdefine and invoke functionality been used on ChipNet, well, if you have a way to visualize this with data, it might be very interesting, whereas with other indexers, it's not available. So then you really need to think about which indexers make what information available. The next category is something with payment protocols. So some of these other payment protocols like BIP70 and JSON Payment Protocol, they are quite flexible and they enable quite a lot of use cases. So if you kind of just explore what are they capable of, can I build something cool with these payment protocols? Do they allow for anything interesting that I didn't realize before? I think that's also just a category for inspiration. And then lastly, to just think about what do the full nodes expose? What is like information that's available on the peer-to-peer network? Is there something interesting here? For example, as I mentioned, these double spend proofs, or maybe related to script functionality. I think there's a lot of interesting potential by talking just to full nodes on the programming layer and see what kind of info they expose. Then I have a few low-level examples of things I would find interesting. Of course, you need to consider how it fits in with the hackathon goals. But one example I have is Flipstart is based on a very old and barely used concept of SIG hash flags. So this is just, they thought, oh, well, we have this archaic thing. It's not really used often, but what if what is the perfect fit for our project? And so similarly, there's next to SIG hash flags, you also have partially signed Bitcoin transactions. So the abbreviations for this is PSBT, and this is also a concept they're very actively exploring on Bitcoin BTC. And people are coming up with all kinds of interesting schemes, so, often multi-party, because you only partially sign the transaction. So I think some of these low-level ideas of SIG hash flags, partially signing, there might be really diamonds in the rough here, just ideas that nobody has picked up, but that it could be very interesting. So this is rather low level, but I still want to mention it as a candidate. On the next slide, I have the title "To DApp or Not to DApp." So this is talking to the point that Jeremy brought up, is there's also tooling which needs to be developed. And I mainly talked about the BCH stack as in terms of building an application, but there's a lot of interesting things that can be built on the tooling layer. One challenge, of course, is if you have never built an application before, then you might also not know which parts of the tooling need a little more help. So sometimes it can even help to start poking around or experimenting with an application to only then realize I'm mad at the tooling and then start developing the tooling. So really to solve your own problem, sometimes by doing is that you realize that everyone else is kind of silly for missing some extra helpful tooling. On the last line, I mentioned the CashCrypt Playground, the pink project that we showed before with the transaction builder. It actually started as a hackathon project. So this was tooling that was not available, and then Roscoe started it during a few-day hackathon. Of course, we kept expanding it, so it's now what it is today. But that's just to show that sometimes developing tooling during a hackathon are the things which live for the longest and which are actually useful to many people. And another example is the VM limit tooling. So last upgrade in May, we activated new VM limits on Bitcoin Cash. But in most tooling, this is not easily available. If I write a script, I cannot easily check how close am I to these new VM limits, just because it only activated in May, and the tooling and libraries are still catching up. So I think doing something about VM limits might be very interesting. And this also interrelates a bit. The VM limits is what made functions and loops possible. So I think there's definitely an integration. There's tooling here that can be explored. For contract authors, if you write a contract, you want to be able to see how close am I to these limits. And that's currently not easily available. Let's see, then we move to my second part of the presentation, which is about the Cash Ninjas project. And first I want to show this BCMI Token Explorer, which is a small handy tool I built. But what's funny about this is, to me, it was just a handy reference, but this was the kind of first BCMI Token Explorer. So many people have actually used this, and it's open source, and I've gotten a lot of positive feedback and people who found this helpful. And this is to illustrate the point that sometimes building a small tool, even though this is a kind of ugly website and kind of a basic functionality, sometimes these are the things that are most helpful, because a lack of tooling is really detrimental to developers. So yeah, kind of explore where do you think the missing tooling is, or which tooling can be improved. Maybe even this Token Explorer can probably be improved upon. So to think about what tooling is available and what is missing. Yeah, it's one last point I want to make about that. And then I want to show the Cash Ninjas stack. I will not go too deep into it, but so is it good that I will start a screen share so I can...
Yeah.
All right, let's see. So Cash Ninjas. This is the Cash Ninjas GitHub repo, and of course, there's multiple repos in this organization. Here is the actual dApp, which is called ninjas.cash, and then here is our CashScript minting contract. We also used tooling for the metadata, which was forked from an existing project called HashLibs, and we upgraded it to support BCH NFTs, so the BCMR standard, and we named it the Shinobi Art Engine. So should you do anything with collectible NFTs, then this might be interesting to you, but it's kind of specific to generating 10,000 NFT images, which are all random combination of the attributes. Then besides the actual minting contract itself and the dApp, we also have the API server. So we do have a backend, so a server running some process in the background. For example, this can keep stats. So if you want to be able to see how many people minted on every day and you want to make graphs, then it's kind of nice to run an API server which has a database and just keeps on-chain statistics. So that's a common use case for servers. Also, we serve our metadata. You can see here we show the NFT images. Here we give you the UTXO we can mint from, and it has a bunch of easy API endpoints to get metadata. So that's the API server. It's very simple for the Cash Ninjas, but for complex decentralized applications, they can be very involved servers in the background. Because, for example, for Parity USD, there's a server which will continuously provide a heartbeat to the system to, for example, provide price or call updates. And this would also be the function of a transaction service. And similarly, for Parity USD, we're exploring keeping on-chain information, so making kind of snapshots of the on-chain state of how many is in circulation, how many holders are there, what's the distribution, how many, all kinds of on-chain statistics, and this is kept by an API server. So that's just, I want to show the general full stack approach. So you will probably, even for decentralized apps, you will probably also want a simple server, even if it's not responsible for any of the wallet connect or smart contract interactions, because those are actually available in the dApp. So maybe a good way to show is to just navigate myself to the Cash Ninjas website, and here you have a mint now, And I just want to show this page because here you have the wallet connect and you can see live how much is minted. So none of this information comes from the server. This is all from on-chain. And then here you can see the different supporting wallets. So that's all in this repo. So if you want an example project or you want to use this template, then this is all open source and available. Similarly, we made a bridge, so that's kind of separate from the core project, but we have made a bridge for NFTs from smart BCH to cash tokens. So if you're interested in bridges, or specifically in a smart BCH to cash tokens bridge, then we have a repo for that. And then lastly, I think, and probably most helpful to people, is if I give you an overview of what this contract repo will look like. So if you want to create a minting contract, what would that look like? First of all, you can see it's marked as Solidity. This is the CashScript code. So this repo is roughly 30% CashScript code and 68% TypeScript. And this is because you can see there's a minting setup here. There's generate contracts, there's invoke payout. So there's, and these are all written in TypeScript. And the contract itself is here at the top. And we have two files. The .cash file is for CashScript files, and JSON is the compiled output. So here you can see the actual opcodes. And so this is what gets output when you compile the source file. So this is not too interesting, the JSON artifact, but it's the .cash file which you will be writing. So this was before the VM limits upgrade. So I clearly marked the maximum at the time. So this is not something current contract authors will have to worry about. And as we saw before, there's first the Pragma version at the top, then a contract with a name. This contract is just called mint. And these are some parameters that you can pass when creating the contract. And then users can only call one function, which is called mint. But then, of course, importantly, for the creators of the project, there's also a payout function, which can pay out the earnings from the NFT mint. So this has highlighting also. This is using Solidity highlighting. And I'll maybe quickly show how that's possible. We have here a Git attributes, and this marks the language to highlight. Any .cash file will be marked as if it was Solidity language. So this is how we're able to get for CashScript, get the highlighting. And overall, the contracts are very readable in CashScript. You can see this, you have the type, this is bytes, this is an integer, and then it's mainly require statements. So it's requiring things about the transaction shape. As we said before, a normal dummy contract, you can spend it in any way you want. But these contracts, they put a restriction on the outputs, on output 0, on the locking bytecode, the tokens, the value, also on output 1, on output 2. So yeah, this is using introspection. And for the payouts, something similar. Here it specifically checks that only a specific person can use this payout function. So this kind of guarded, or like it does an authorization check, and then you have more require statements about the introspection. So overall, I think it's quite readable, the contract, and the learning curve should not be too high. But I'll hear what and I'll judge from how many questions I get during the Blaze hackathon whether that's true or not. And then lastly, I guess I want to show the TypeScript files. So these are also using the transaction builder, which we covered before. So I'll navigate to one of the TypeScript files. And as you can see, this is a kind of normal setup. We use CashScript and libauth. And libauth is mainly for helper functions. So in this case, we use an hex to bin and a VM number to begin. So just really helper functions. And it also uses mainnet.js. So this is the JavaScript stack I was talking about. So I think the Cash Ninjas project is actually a nice demonstration because it uses both. And then it uses some stuff with the seed phrase, which of course is hidden from the repo. And then we initialize a wallet with mainnet.js. And then I think later here the transaction building, here the transaction builder is actually using the CashScript transaction builder. So it's mainly using, I think, the wallet class. Let's quickly check what it's using the wallet for. I think it's using the wallet to check for the to initialize the wallet from a seed. Yeah, so it's using an HD wallet and initializing it from the seed words, the seed phrase. So that's very easy with mainnet.js, I find. So I'm using mainnet.js for this functionality. But then the transaction building, as we discussed before, it's using the CashCrypt transaction builder with add inputs and then the unlockers. Yeah, so here specifically we add a payout unlocker because this is the function called invoke payout. And then we .send the transaction and get back the transaction ID. And if this whole program runs, then you would see on your in your console, you would see the transaction ID as well as the payout amount. So this is how you use CashCrypt in practice together with libauth and mainnet.js. And so this is a dApp that's been running on mainnet and has actual users and was one of the first, I think the first multi-threaded cash tokens minting app. So you can have multiple simultaneous users. It was kind of the claim to fame of the Cash Ninjas project. And overall, it was very fun to develop with this tooling. And I think the state of the tooling is better than ever. And it's very, very pleasant, actually, to be building on Bitcoin Cash because the tooling is now in a mature state, except for maybe the functions stuff, which is still up and coming. But I'm guessing in a year or so, even that will be mature tooling. So that's all I want to say about the Cash Ninjas, I think. So I'll leave it open to questions, maybe. And I'll stop the screen share.
I have at least a question, but does anyone in the audience have a question? Now's your chance to jump in. No? Okay, my question is, what about AI? Obviously, we're in the era that people might be trying to figure out with tooling or get ideas or learn how to build smart contracts or whatever. And there's the documentation, but they can also just give code snippets or ask questions to AI. Do you use AI for that? And if you have, what kind of experience do you have? Is anyone particularly better or worse for this kind of thing, especially since cutting edge BCH stuff may not necessarily be the most accurate for AI to be able to figure out?
Yeah, thanks for that question. So one interesting thing about the Cash Ninjas project, it's now 1.5 years ago or so, or maybe 2 years. Anyways, we used AI there to have the NFT names and the NFT description, to have like a whole backstory and to have unique names. So I think in that kind of thing, it was already kind of cool to use it for an NFT project back then. But now for coding, I think it's super helpful if you want to do user interfaces. So it's incredibly good at using JavaScript frameworks to create UIs. And then I know specifically Cloud Code is good at this, but I'm sure GPT-5 or others are almost as good. For CashCrypt specifically, I don't think it is very helpful yet, because at least not for production applications where a lot of money is on the line. So this is thinking parity USD, for example. Of course, if you're quickly experimenting, then it might be helpful, but I think you will still need to copy paste the documentation as context into the chat window, because if you're using agents, you will need to explicitly tell it, oh, go look up the documentation on the website, because otherwise it will think it knows because of solidity and because of the account model, but then it will end up doing a bunch of things actually the wrong way. So it's not good for you to think it knows what it's doing without having the extra context. But I think if you say, take a look at the mainnet.js documentation, the CashCrypt documentation, and I want to use BCH Wallet Connect, and you also paste in an example, I think then it's probably really good. But I don't think with smart contracts, anything that's security sensitive. So that's talking about mainnet applications. Of course, on testnet, you can try insecure things. That's fine. But for smart contracts which ship in production, I think it's important every line is checked by yourself, and probably even for high-value applications also by an auditor. So for that, I wouldn't fully trust AI. Not yet. Maybe even in the coming years, it's still too risky, because you don't want to take a chance that there might be some hallucination or sometimes you tell an AI, but like, wait, it's obviously insecure, and it says, oh well, my bad, I will try again. Yeah, you don't want to have that happen in your production application where it like made a silly mistake somehow.
Can I hop in here
yeah.
for just a moment? So I'm constantly complaining to my boss, like, because he'll send me like chat GPT conversations, and he's like, oh, the AI says this is possible. And then like half of my job is going line by line and going, this is fundamentally wrong, and here's why. And like, I'm always trying to tell him, like, you know, ask the AI for previous works about a concept, but don't try to get it to generate something novel or even like an old technology in a novel implementation, because it's going to lie to you, and it's going to be so much more effort to work backwards than to just be like, okay, here's reference material. I need to go through the reference material to understand what I'm doing now.
Yeah. I think there's probably a lot of truth that the productivity gains come from how you use it, but of course it's not a very satisfying answer. But there's if you tell it just to generate your whole DApp from start to finish, like I would be very surprised if you get anything half working or functional. So I think you really need to guide it and do a lot of the thinking yourself, or break up large thing into small steps and provide relevant context. And even if you can just point it to the right libraries, that's already a big help, because otherwise it will think up something from BTC and tell you some things are not possible or not in BCH because it does not know about VM limits or cache token. Maybe cache tokens it knows, but then definitely the new upgrade about the function and loops, it most likely will not be trained on this, or it will not have enough data. So it will not be helpful, I think, in these more cutting edge things. But for generating user interfaces, it's incredibly good. So I've been surprised with how, for example, if you want to create a dashboard or just a UI, how quick people can get started and how good the results are. So I would say maybe try AI everywhere, but I think you will quickly find out that in some areas it will be much more helpful than, for example, on the smart contract front, specifically for cache script.
Even if you have a lot of documentation, like then you're almost working against the context window, where it's like that documentation takes up, let's say, 3/4 of your overall context window, and your little instruction at the end is not a very important thing, like, in how the AI responds. So yeah, I second the breaking it down into as small of a step as possible and work from there.
Yes, Emergent Reasons points out in the chat, if you want to use AI for programming, you can pay per prompt for all the different AIs in Bitcoin Cash at a Nano GPT. So shout out to the team building that. They're doing a fantastic job. I also have another question, which is, I've seen some concern, mild concern, I would say, from a couple of people interested in Blaze, that the Layla requirement to have one of the Layla upgrades in there is sort of like a big hurdle, or they're very intimidated by that. Of course, this year we have designed that is the only requirement. So it's not like one in a list of many. It's the only possible sticking point that people could have. But also, secondly, functions and loops are quite general. So while we do want to encourage people to engage with these new upgrades, that's the whole point of having the new upgrades, is that people can build and use them in that application. Of course, like we said, the tooling is maybe not mature in all cases. So what would you say to anybody who was interested in Blaze or has an idea for a project, but they're worried about, oh, what if there's not a way to include the Layla upgrade in there somehow?
Well, I think that's an interesting concern. I think probably people can get quite creative. There's also, as you mentioned in the beginning, there's the bounties or whatever. So if people really don't want to, I guess they can take a look at the bounties or these other options. But if people want to do something with the novel upgrades, but are not sure about getting into the low-level tooling stuff, then, for example, what I suggested, just visualizing on ChipNet how many define op-invoke has been used, or measuring the VM limits related to op-define, op-invoke, or loops. I think these are all interesting ideas and not necessarily super technical. So I think you can also be creative with the scope. So it's you have to do something with the new upgrades, but that's still quite broad. So I think if data visualization, testing limits, or even playing around with the low-level primitives, people can kind of decide for themselves what aspect of the new upgrades they find interesting. Maybe, for example, if they think, oh, it's kind of cool that Spedden exists or something, but that they can somehow contribute there and make it cross-chain. Or I'm also just spitballing at this point, but I think there will be an exploratory process where everyone kind of figures out what their kind of angle on the new upgrade is, and I'm sure that there will be many great project ideas in the end.
Yes.
And as you said, loops are very general, and I think many, even of the Wallet Connect example apps I listed, I think you can probably tweak the contracts to really leverage loops, because loops are so general that it's often useful to be able to count, for example, the number of inputs or outputs, or sum up items.
Yes, I do want to just reassure everybody that, of course, the judges do know and are taking into context the fact that these are the cutting edge upgrades. And of course, we'll have plenty of help available. We'll have all the Telegram channels. You can talk to us in the Blaze groups and so forth. We'll refer you to technical experts wherever it's needed. And almost any idea, I am confident, can be modified or adapted just slightly to include the Layla upgrades. So feel free to talk to us about that if you have any concerns about it. Carl says, Mathieu, your YouTube series has been a great resource. Also, BitcoinCashUniversity.com has been a great resource. That's a good point. That's another great place to look, BitcoinCashUniversity.com, and also BitcoinCashPodcast.com/code. I have a list of resources there as well, which people might want to look into. Do we have any other final questions? And if not, I've got a couple announcements and then we'll move to wrap up. Okay, nothing further. A couple things. Firstly, if you send donations to the address on the slide, 50% of that is going into the Blaze prize pool, and the other 50% is used to put on informational sessions and operational requirements like that. So feel free to send us some BCH or some cash tokens. We want to give a thanks to all of our sponsors, BCH Bull, a unique web application that allows users to take long positions with leverage or hedge with Bitcoin Cash against a number of other metals, fiat, and crypto assets, bchbull.com. General Protocols prides itself on developing permissionless, trustless, borderless financial solutions for the whole world. We are working at the frontier of UTXO blockchain development, generalprotocols.com. The Bitcoin Cash podcast for the latest cryptocurrency and BCH news, with deep dives on BCH topics and a variety of guests from the BCH community, bitcoincashpodcast.com. Selene Wallet puts easy, no-hassle instant payments in the palm of your hand. Experience the future of money, a global digital economy powered by BCH at selene.cash. Cash Stamps allows users to create and redeem BCH stamps for gifts, promotion, and adoption of Bitcoin Cash. And we do have a cheeky one of those on the next slide. At the Blockchain for Good Alliance, we harness the transformative power of blockchain technology to tackle some of the most critical challenges facing society in the world at large today. Chainforgood.org. BCH1 is the signal layer for Bitcoin Cash, community discovery, build velocity, capital alignment. BCH-1.org. And Big Hair Tom, an old timer that wants wallet addresses simplified. So we do have that cash stamp that I mentioned, and some final calls to action. Everybody who wants to be involved in Blaze, go to the Dora Hacks link in the description and register. Also, next week, you can mark in your calendar, we'll be having a second workshop with Mainnet Pat, similar to this one, but obviously with a different angle of his takes of how people can get started. That will be at 2 p.m. UTC on Saturday, the 1st of November. Of course, you can contact us at Blaze on the Dora Hacks question tab, on Telegram at BCH Blaze, and at Twitter at BCH Blaze. And you can follow the Bitcoin Cash podcast and the BCH Bullet to keep up to date with BCH in general. Mathieu, I wanted to give you a chance to shout out your flip starter that you mentioned, and maybe also upcoming release of Parity USD. Let people know what they need to know about those two initiatives.
Yeah, thanks. So for Cashcrypt, we have an ongoing flip starter, I think running for 10 days still, for ongoing development for the next year. So this is specifically to implement functions and fully implement loops. We have fully done a write-up on our roadmap and our plans for the next year. So even if you're just interested in what we're up to or what the future holds, I think that's an interesting thing to refer to. I think it's at flipstarter.cashcrypt.org. So it's at the subdomain flipstarter.cashcrypt.org. And then for Parity USD, I encourage people to check out the website, maybe follow the updates on Telegram and X. I think it will be an exciting coming few months. And yeah, stay tuned because there will be more announcements coming soon. So the socials and the Telegram are the best places to follow. As well as there's a few blog posts we have already written with details, and there will be more to come. So yeah, that's everything for Cashcrypt and for Parity.
Excellent. Well, there you go. Leading by example, shipping new products in the BCH ecosystem. Here is the calendar with all the dates. So go and put them all in your calendar now. I can note that we have actually extended the registration period. So it says here Friday, 31st October is when the registrations close, but that is only the pre-registration. Actually, you can register now through until November the 14th. Right up until the hacking time begins. But of course, the earlier, the better, so that we have an accurate idea of how many teams are going to be in touch with Blaze, and also so you can keep up to date with all the latest information that we put up on the Dora Hacks page. So go sign up on Dora Hacks today. Thank you to everybody who participated in the chat. Of course, if you have any follow-up questions, we will be available to take those too. Thank you to the guest that joined us on the live stream, and thank you to Mathieu for his presentation. We will be back next week, like I said, at 2 p.m. UTC on Saturday, the 1st of November, with the Mainnet Pat workshop. Thank you all for watching. Till next time.
Thank you for having me.